Hello and welcome to Gang Culture Podcast, a series educating you about gang culture. This season, our host Ellis Rouse continues to talk with an array of unique voices to inspire, empower, and cause change. But also this season, we are exploring alternative activities being offered to teens in Delaware. Whether you are listening at home, school, or on the way to work, we hope you enjoy and share with others.
Welcome back to Gang Culture. Today we are talking to Ronald Handy Sr., who is a Leaders in Transition Coordinator. Ronald has served the community since 1986, working with Boys and Girls Clubs of Delaware, and currently assists returning citizens back into society and setting them up for productive future. Thank you for joining us, Ronald. So Ronald, could you tell us a bit about your work?
Basically, I've been working with GVI Group Violence Intervention for 5 years now, and currently I started as a youth life coach, and now I'm the Leaders in Transition Coordinator. My experience dealing with the youth and everything, it really helped me out, and stuff that I did in the community was a natural fit. Currently, what I do is take people who were leaders and expand on their skill set and help them give back to the community, things that they may have done some negative behavior in, but now we're going back, teaching other people a direction out and teach them just positive things that help uplift our community.
That's awesome. And I know a bit about the work that you've done because we've done some work together. So what drew you into doing this?
Honestly, when I came back home in '86, I was living in Florida. I was in the service, but when I came home, I noticed a lot of things that was going on, and I heard people complaining. And my thing was, if you're complaining, you're not doing anything, you're part of the problem. So from that moment on, I had great mentors in my life. Every opportunity that I get, I always shout out Rich Johnson and Gail Jackson with Brown's Boys and Girls Club, because they were very strong role models. Trip, that was there, a Big Cat, them guys, they was definitely down in the trenches, but they taught us to always be honest and taught us manhood. They didn't let us slip, and I held on to that. And the unique thing is, as a member, I always thought I would come back and volunteer. I never knew I would be the director of one at some point in my life. Yeah.
You mentioned Trip and those guys, just having those stakeholders in the community, mm-hmm. and people that we can turn to and sort of follow in some footsteps and,
yes.
and get ourselves going in this direction. Have you or someone else close to you been personally affected by gang culture?
Yeah, it's been multiple people, and I think I understand gang culture, right? Although we may not want somebody to go down that road, and getting a better understanding that throughout the years is we have to do better at giving people opportunities and alternatives. We're living in a society now where so many things are been taken away from our youth, and then we stare at them like, why are you doing this? It's like, okay, well, you took everything from me, and the people I've lost, it hurt. And it hurt because some of them, they're not coming home, and not because of death. Like, they're not coming home, and it feels good to get those phone calls, and actually talk to them, for them all to say, like, yo, coach, like, you really held me down. And the fact that I still answer those phone calls lets me know that whatever decision they made, they still had that level of respect for me.
Yeah. So having that relationship with these people, with these young guys, mm-hmm. and girls,
Yes.
is really important. Yeah, I agree. Do you have any success stories you want to share?
Well, we have a person, I speak highly of her, but she was one of them, as they say, and she's now an employee with the state doing very well. You know, just to listen to her talk and from day one, boy, she was something, but to really see her mature and really starting to grow into her own really means a lot. And I have another young man who he's actually had his own, well, it's two of them that I'm really, really proud of right now. Started their own nonprofit, been giving back to the community. So they really taking the tools that I've given them and they running with them. And I like that.
Yeah. I could share a little bit there because my son, we started a program here at Bellevue Community Center. And, you know, I told him in the beginning of it, I said, look, this is for us. Mm-hmm. And we're gonna do this as a family. And now he's coaching and he's helping out with the 76ers and things like that. So I definitely understand where you're coming from, and it's a great feeling. What are some common reasons people join gangs, and how can parents, mentors, and peers help to prevent kids from going down that route?
And this is where I'm gonna switch it up a little bit with everybody. One, we have to get out of this word gang is something negative. So we're making gangs negative, and people who've been, I would say, thrown out of society for whatever reason, so they have a common bond. But if you're constantly telling them that you're wrong or you're bad or anything like that, they're going to start gravitating toward what people say about them. And originally, people don't understand, gangs came about to uplift the community. It wasn't about negative behavior, you know. So even with that, if you look around now, it's multiple gangs out here, but we don't call them gangs. They're called clubs. You got bike clubs, you got car clubs, you got all kind of clubs out here, right? But they've never been called gangs, you know. So, but you have people out here who they don't want to accept the fact that there's a part of society that's reaching out for help and everybody's turned their back on them. So now what happens is they have like traumas. That's what the bond is, you know. And we know when you deal with traumas or you've been in a trauma, that person that was there with you in that dark time, you're going to be close to, you know. So whatever goes on, you got their back. You know, and it takes organizations and mentors and people to let them know, I understand the bond, but you also got to be able to correct bad behavior, you know. And then sometimes in society, the one thing that I constantly work on is stop. A person's mistake is not their title. You know, people make a mistake and they automatically want to put a title on that person, and then even when they want to redirect their lives, they keep reminding them of the choice that they made and not the person that they became.
Yeah, I agree with you when you talk about gangs, you know, having that negative connotation on them. Growing up, for me, it wasn't a gang. It was brothers. We were a brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And, you know, these brothers looked out for my mom, my sister, mm-hmm. and my mom used to take them to church. And you know, she would actually introduce them to the whole church, and they would mm-hmm. stand up and they felt accepted by the community. And I think with having that, they took that back into the neighborhood, right, and used it as love. You know, it wasn't a negative connotation on it because everybody was like, oh, that's the gang. But they you know, they were able to use that love and pour it back into the community.
Right. And look, I'm gonna use that same analogy. Nobody ever called people in a congregation a gang. You know what I mean? People never call people who are with association that's giving back a gang, right? Although one person may do something in that group that may break the law, it's pointed to that one person who did something, not the entire group. Right now, gangs are looked at as if one person do something wrong, then everybody in the gang is wrong, and that's not necessarily true.
Right. Yeah, thank you for that, Coach. How do you earn trust with someone who you first meet, when you first meet them?
With me, and I'll give you a story, consistency and honesty. You know what I mean? I had a guy I chased for 9 months. Like, I literally chased this guy for 9 months. And one day we were sitting there talking, and he was at his, somebody he respected, his big brother. He was at his house. And he was like, you know, he told, come downstairs. And me and him was sitting outside, and I just looked at him. I'm like, when you gonna change, man? I said, I'm not going nowhere. I'm not going anywhere, so I'm gonna keep showing up until you decide that you want to change. And some different things happened, and he was able to reach out to me. I was able to do the things that I said I was going to do. And if I couldn't do it, I said, man, I may not be able to do that, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. And with him, it's a success. So there was an incident at his house one evening, and rather than him retaliate, he gave me a call. Right? He was upset, but he gave me a call, and I drove around Hockessin. I went and got him from in town. We drove around Hockessin to 3 in the morning, just talking. I dropped him off at somebody's house. He texted me the next morning and said, thank you, you know, because he would have made a bad choice. So that let me know, like, if you really consistent and just be honest, like, don't ever go out here and try to say and do something that you're not. You know, if I'm not that, I'm not that. And it's just that simple. And never try to be their hero. They don't need a hero. They need somebody who's gonna sit down like, yo, you know you was wrong, and congratulate them when they do something good, and be there to support them, no matter what the decision is.
Right. So building a real relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. What goes into preparing a returning citizen into society?
Right now, one of the biggest things is employment. People don't understand, like, it's a lot of people who come home, it's a struggle getting a job. And then if they do get a job, it's low paying, not a lot of hours. And you're telling a person who's maybe not been home in a while, society has changed, technology has changed. You're putting all these things on them, burdens, they're burdens and barriers. You're putting all these things on them, and then you're telling them, go be successful, right? With really no supports. They say there's supports, but there's minimal, right? So if I got a person who really doesn't make enough money to pay rent, electric, but I need you to show up every day for this little bit of money, you know, they get frustrated, but that's why you need people around them that's going to keep them focused. You got to keep them focused. Mental health is realistic, because I tell people, I don't care how strong you are, if you've been incarcerated for a long time, there's an adjustment period that you have to make. And I tell people how, with hostages, there's a whole protocol that's followed. When they come back, there's a whole protocol that's done, from the mental health to family unification to employment to treatment. You have all these things in place, but when somebody comes home from being incarcerated, you just throwing them out there and said, figure it out. That's not fair.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough, you know, because you've been held and restricted in so many ways, mm-hmm. And then when you get out into society, it's like, wow, now I just got to figure this out.
Yep, and you got to understand that something as basic as, so everybody knows, if you go to apply for a job, you need ID, social security card, but guess what? In order to get an ID or social security card, you got to have a birth certificate. In order to have a birth certificate, you got to have an ID. Like, so now you caught in, I need documentation to get documentation, but I don't have the documentation. Now you're looking at me like, oh, why you can't get it?
Yeah. Has there ever been a case where things didn't go as you had hoped? Is there anything you learned from that particular experience?
To be real vague, yes. I mean, it's a person that I I became real close to him. And it's actually when he first came home, I have a picture of him, and he gave me the biggest hug, and I watched him leave, and then he made some decisions, and to know that person is not coming home, when he first finally got sent down, I always told him, I got eyes on you no matter where you at, and it was a struggle, and I think that pain is saying that person had so many opportunities and was put in a good position, but he made a decision, and he has to live with it. And me and him talked on the phone one day, and I was like, until you accept the things that you've done, you're going to struggle while you're behind the wall. And he started laughing. He was like, yo, Coach Ron, he said, I've just accepted what I've done. I said, okay, now you got to build on that now. But to hear him say that, and he always tells, like, you constantly, when I speak to you, you still giving me jewels. Yeah, I'm not going to, I don't care where you at. I'm still going to be in your ear. And when you wrong, I'm going to tell you wrong.
Yeah. So you holding him accountable and
always,
and him holding himself accountable and acknowledging, yeah. And
I think we have to do more of that. One of the biggest problems that I have, and I've said it before, is youth, when they're doing when they're displaying certain behaviors, we're a little too lenient. And the reason I say that, because a person do something the first time, you know better. Maybe they didn't know better. They do it again. Look, didn't we have a discussion? They do it a third time. Okay, now we're going to give you a counselor. They do it a fourth time. It's like, okay, well, maybe we need to set you down for 30 days. Then they do it the fifth time. That's their behavior now. Something that could have been corrected early on, because we're so worried about, we want to give them a chance. We can't use 1960 models with 2020 issues. I'm not saying that those models were wrong, but it's two different times.
Definitely. I agree. What are some misconceptions that the public has about gang members?
Like I was saying earlier, everybody think all gangs is people out here just being violent all the time and not doing anything, not realizing the reality is that they came about because they wanted to protect their neighborhoods. And if you actually look at the acronyms for certain gangs, it was basically positive stuff for their community. You know what I mean? You had one or two outliers may have done whatever they done, but what I come to understand is gangs have structure and hierarchy. And there's a lot of people that may not understand. I'm not saying everything goes right all the time, but there is structure in there where somebody can say, okay, that's it, let it go, stop, and it stops. It's more things that's being stopped than people know about. There's more phone calls being made that, like, little bro, you need to fall back. And they fall back. But nobody can talk about that,
Yeah. When you mentioned that the gangs were actually created to protect the neighborhood, that was one of the things that I was drawn to, because my neighborhood was taken over by drug dealers, and they weren't from the neighborhood.
Right.
So when my neighbors and some of the brothers I grew up with went to prison for whatever little crimes, and when they came home, they had this gang motto, and it was actually enticing, because it was a collective effort to gain the community back and push the drug dealers out. Obviously there's some bad apples in the bunch, and things go a little bit awry, but yeah, it a lot of misconceptions with what gangs are all about. And I knew personally I didn't want to hurt or harm anyone.
Right.
and they knew I wasn't that guy.
Right.
So they kept me from things like that might have been detrimental to my future.
And I'm gonna give you a real quick history. People talk about the Black Panther Party. I always studied him, Marcus Garvey. I studied all of them. But when I ask people, do they know how the Black Panthers started? Nobody can answer it. They actually got started because a kid got hit crossing the street after school. So they started as crossing guards just to make sure that when the students got off the bus, they were able to cross the street safely. But what happened was they started helping with homework, speaking to the kids, oh, let me help you with homework. Then when they started helping with homework, they was like, well, you're hungry. You know what I mean? Okay, now let's start feeding you. That's how those after-school programs got started. So now I'm feeding and I'm talking to you. Oh, you have a need that needs to be met. Okay, let's bring some resources in. That's how they originally got started.
Yeah. So, as you mentioned, the Black Panther Party, the gang that I joined derived from the Black Panther Party, the Bloods, which stood for brotherly love, override oppression and destruction. And that's what drew me to that brotherhood. When I heard that name, I said, "This is powerful. We can do something with this." Yeah. What is one thing you want listeners to take away from our conversation?
Everybody deserves opportunity. One thing I do with my lit guys, and I always tell them is, my job is to give you resources and opportunities. And instill in them that you're not the decision that you made. Okay, it may have happened, but don't live there. One of the things that I taught them is, if you're constantly talking about what you used to be, you're stuck there. At some point, you got to have growth. So, and they have to see success too. Let's be honest. A person who's always told you need to do right, you need to do right, you need to do right, but everybody keep knocking them back. It takes a person with a lot of resiliency to say, you know what, I'm still going to persevere through this. Not everybody has that for whatever reason. So, number one, you got to give them examples of those who made that choice to change. You got to give them opportunities. You got to give them resources. And I'm not saying just give, but you got to be able to say, here's an opportunity, here go the resources, but it's up to you to take advantage of it. And then for those who don't take advantage of it, I'm still going to be here for you when you decide this is what you want to do. It's sad to say some of us just need to get knocked in the head a couple times before we realize, man, that path's not working.
Yeah. I have a saying that I used to tell my sons. You won't learn how to ride the bike until you fall off.
That's the truth.
So, yeah. Coach Ron, I really appreciate this conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for your insight.
No problem.
And thank you for your work, your humanitarian work, and the amount of lives that you've impacted.
So
I personally know that you are a great man to the community. And again, thank you for joining us. And
I like to leave. I tell everybody they need a personal quote for their life. And my personal quote is to uplift my community so everybody has a better quality of life. That's what I live by.
Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Coach Ron.
We hope you found this episode informative. We look forward to continuing the conversation and stay tuned for our next episode.
You're listening to a production from The Cause. Learn more at causetheworld.com.